Hello and welcome to the Intruder map making guide. I'm going to show you how to make maps for the game. Now here's some 3D modeling software and here's some image editing software to make your own props, but I'm going to show you how to import some later on from a website. Now you want to install Unity for Windows or Unity for Mac, and you're going to see a window like this. You want to have both Windows build support and Mac build support. Now click the link that says download. Here's where you get the map making package. It should be up to date, so click the most recent one and then click the Superboss Doors Unity package. When you update, you want to back up your file. So I'm going to start a new file and I'm going to name it Toot for the tutorial. And we want to delete this camera because we're not going to need it for now. We're going to go to Assets, we're going to go to Import Package, Custom Package, and then we're going to locate where we installed the map maker. Right? The map maker is a Unity file, Unity package. So it's this one. I'm going to click import or open, and it should start importing my package. I click import once again, and I close this tab because we're not going to make use of that. We're only going to use inspector, lighting, and occlusion. Now, we have to close Unity, but before I do that, we have to save the scene, or the Unity file. So we'll save, and then it closes. I'll reopen Unity, and now the buttons work. Look at that. Those are manipulation buttons. You can move stuff around with those. But I can create a CSG from game objects. I go down, scroll to it. You can move your camera around with right click and WASD. And you can pretty much manipulate the square using the yellow handles. You want to click rebuild after changing stuff. You want to use force rebuild or rebuild, but never auto rebuild. You can use the spawn proxy button here to create an intruder spawn and a guard spawn, as well as many other things. You must have both types of team spawns before you test your level. When you add stuff into this scene, it gets added to your hierarchy over here. So we have intruder and guard spawn, and that's all you need to test, but I'm gonna add a wall here. So what you can do is you can use Control D to duplicate walls and floors and change stuff around. So now that I've made a wall, I want to change my width, my grid size to 0.25. Now that I've made a wall, I'll show you how to mess around with these lighting settings later, but for now, we want to change the sun source to be the sun, directional sun that we have. Now I want to go to generate lighting. Now that I've generated lighting, I can try to test my map. Once you test your map, it should load up fairly quickly, and here you can pick either side. We want to go to import package, custom package. We want to use the Superboss Doors package and import that. And once we've had that imported, we can click Assets, Superboss Doors, Prefabs, and drag and drop one of these from the asset folder into the view or the scene. To use the doors properly, we want to make sure these corners snap together. To do that, we want the movement gizmo and the door selected. Press and hold V and click and drag on that section and drag it over to the other corner, and they should snap. For this part, I'm just continuing the wall. I'm duplicating segments of the wall and extending it, and I'm going to make a window. I'm going to duplicate this part of the wall and then turn it to subtraction mode to create a window. To change a brush into subtraction mode, you want to click here and switch it to subtract, or you want to hit the hotkey button S. After making changes to your CSG brush, don't forget to hit rebuild. Now that we have our doors in place, we can mess around with the settings. Here's the add component button. We're going to mess around with this later, but Now that we have our door added, we can tweak the settings, we can tweak the max door angle, the invert rotation, the lock type, the can lock pick, and we can also see where the door path is going to go. And because we're tweaking the settings, we want to make sure that the door doesn't clip into the wall. So I've lowered the max door angle to 179. The rest of the settings control how the door behaves. If you have a hinge door, it'll swing open, a sliding door will slide away, and if you invert the rotation, it'll open inwards instead of outwards. If you set a lock type to randomly lock, when the round starts, it'll either be locked or unlocked, and it'll be randomly chosen. If you set it to always unlocked, it'll never be randomly locked or locked at all. If you set it to always locked, it'll always be locked, obviously. If you can lockpick it, you'll be able to pull up your lockpick and lockpick the door. And if it shows the door path, it's pretty much just UI only. It'll show you how far the door swings open. Here's how to make stairs an intruder. You want to select the wall. You want to duplicate it with Control D. You want to have it be 0.5 units deep and 0.25 units tall. You want to duplicate it all the way to the floor. Then if you want a landing, you can stretch the step out. You want to make sure it matches up against the floor. You want to click rebuild. Then as it is now, it's going to be bumpy to walk up. So we need to create a new CSG, and we're going to use this one to create the clipping to make sure that it's smooth to walk up. So I'm going to make it line up with the first step. I'm going to have it be the same dimensions, except it's going to be a wedge. So I'll also make sure that it's invisible. And you do that by messing with the settings. So I'm going to bring these two sets of vertices down. As you can see, the invisible tag is set in the brush settings. You just duplicate this all the way up. I'm going to rotate this. And since it doesn't match up here, we can vertex snap. So I'm going to click the corner here, click and drag while holding V. And then I'm going to duplicate this all the way up. And now we have stairs. After you've clipped your stairs, you want to click rebuild so collision mesh data is added. You want to click mesh group in the hierarchy, then collision mesh, then go to add component. You want to add the ignore bullet layer, and this makes sure that grenades bounce on the steps and don't just roll down on the clipping. As we can see, we're getting light bleed under the steps. So, to fix that, we need to click our directional light and fix the biases in order to make sure that no light is bleeding through. I'm going to press the spawn proxy button to spawn a few more objects I need for my map. I'm going to spawn glass for my window, fit it in, and then the remaining game objects for the raid game mode. Using the normal rescale tool is kind of difficult, so in order to enter this margin rescale mode, you want to click T on your keyboard. You can also use the spawn proxy button to insert hack nodes into your map. You can have both objectives if you want, but for now, I only want the briefcase and the capture point. The proper way to create a new floor for your building is by creating a new CSG, aligning it with the top of the bottom floor, and stretching it out. Then you want to duplicate this floor to create walls and to create any other architecture you want for the new floor. There are many different ways to make doorways. You can build around the doorway using 3 separate CSG brushes, or you can use a single subtraction brush to make the doorway. I'm going to make another doorway here using the subtract brush, but I'm going to make sliding doors instead. Now, in order to make sliding doors, we want to have either the left half or the right half of the door selected. And then we want to switch the door type to sliding instead of hinged, right? Because hinge makes it swing open rather than slide open. Then what we want to do is we want to select the door as a whole. Then we want to vertex snap it to the other door so it's still centered. And then we want to mess with the sliding options. We want to make the door slide away from the center. So we tweak the x axis. And then we do the same for the other door, but we want it to slide in the opposite direction. So again, we mess with the sliding option and make it slide in the other direction. We also want to edit the hitbox. If we edit this hitbox, it's basically the interaction box. Anytime anyone uses their scroll wheel while facing this box, interacts with the door. It's basically the interaction hitbox for the door. As long as you scroll wheel while looking at this box, the doors will slide open. Now when you scroll wheel and you're close enough to the door, it'll slide open or shut. So now I'm going to show you how to add custom textures. I'm on textures.com, which is the recommended place to get textures from. I'm going to look for a floor texture. I see these pretty nice marble tiles. So there's the preview. You're going to want to download the albedo, the normal, and the ambient occlusion. You don't need to download the ambient occlusion, but if you want your map to look nicer, I guess you can. So now you go back into Unity, you're going to right click the assets, create a folder. You're going to want to name this. I'm going to name this material and textures. This is where I'm going to put all of my textures and materials. I'm going to create another folder for textures. Now I'm going to click and drag the textures I've downloaded and import them into this folder. So there's the albedo, there's the ambient occlusion, there's the normal. Now I'm going to right click, create a material. Now I'm going to name it marble texture or marble floor. Now I'm going to look at it in the inspector, and we can see that once we click off, it gets lost. So you want to click the tiny lock in the top right. Now we go over to our textures and we click and drag them into little squares. So we have albedo, normal, and occlusion. And you also want to click fix now. But yeah, you can fix the smoothness and any other settings. Now, this is how we're going to apply the texture. So as you can see, I can click and drag in face mode in Saber CSG to drag textures around on the surface. I want to click set. I want to set that texture. Now, what if I don't want it on the entire floor? Well, this is easy to do. Well, before that, you can scale the texture up and down, right? I want it to be about this size. And now I'm going to show you how to apply textures selectively. So I'll go to clip, and then I'll slice, I'll split those segments. And once I split and click rebuild, you see we have 3 sections here. And now what I can do is I can set the other 2 by selecting them in face and then switching them back. So I'll select the 2 outer ones and then I'll set those textures back. And then if we want, we can select underneath and optimize our map by excluding those faces, since nobody's going to be able to see them. And there we go. We have a little textured path right on our map. So now let's tweak the texture a bit. I'm going to go over to where I saved or created my material. It's right here. I'm going to click fix now. So that fixed the lighting issue with it. You can fix the occlusion, and that darkens or brightens the grout between the tiles. And additionally, you can click the white square, tweak the color on it. I like a little bit more red. I think it looks nice. You can also mess with the smoothness in the normal map and a bunch of other stuff. Now here's how to add a model. So I'm on Turbo Squid. I looked up a table. I chose this table that reads pants. I don't know why it read pants, just did. But I chose it. I clicked the free download. And it took me to this page in which I looked at all the file types. I clicked show all. And it had all the different file types. you want an FBX file type. Make sure it says FBX. I clicked the one underneath because it's a different style. It says wood. So I'm gonna take these files and drag and drop them from here onto my desktop. And then what I do from here is I open up Unity, and then I'm gonna struggle to dock the window to the right side. Okay, now we click and drag into a folder. We want a folder that says that's models, and then we want the specific model to be table. So after we do that, we want to make sure that we click the model and we want to generate colliders and generate light map UVs on the model when we have it selected in the inspector. And now we can drag and drop the model into the scene view and rescale it. If your camera's clipping into stuff, go into Game Object and align View to Selected, and that should fix it. Okay, so here's how to add custom sounds. You want to go to Game Object, Audio Source. Then this is the object in our scene view that's going to play our audio. You can switch the spatial blend. 2D is for background noises, like birds chirping or any ambient. 3D is for localized sound, like, I don't know, an alarm playing in a particular area, or something you don't want to be throughout the entire map. I downloaded some sound effects from YouTube, right here. So once we have them downloaded, you can drag and drop them to your desktop. And then drag them into your assets folder. Now, depending on the size of the files, it may take a long time to load in the ambient sounds. So it spent a while since these were pretty large files. Anyway, you can click the audio sources themselves and tweak the compression and the quality and all that sorts of stuff. But for now, we want to select the audio here. We're going to pick one of the files we have. And I'm going to pick Spring. Let me see, where's Spring? Spring here. It's a spring sound effect of a push door. And I set it to 2D, so it plays no matter where I am, at least once. You can have sound effects loop, and you can check the preview and see what the sound effect sounds like. So you can also lower the volume so your ambient background noise isn't like too loud. If you tick loop, it just loops again. You can add a particle system by clicking Game Object, Particle System. It's got a crap ton of settings, so I'm not going to go over that right now. Also, if you're map making right now and you've been map making for a while, you probably want to click Save. Saving is really important because you can lose a lot of progress if Unity crashes, and it tends to crash a lot. I know I've had bad experiences with Unity crashing and not having backed up or saved for a while. Anyway, here's how to add lights. Well, actually, before you add lights, you want to click your CSG models and tick Generate Light Map UVs on all of them. And now you want to add lights. So we go to Light, Directional Light, or Spotlight, whichever one. Well, we already have a directional light in the scene, so you don't want to add another one. what you should do instead is add a spotlight or a point light. And you can tweak the settings on the spotlight by clicking the handles. You want to change it to baked, and you want to tweak the intensity and the radius or the angle. I put it in front of this doorway here, and I also gonna duplicate it. I duplicated it and created a point light. And what you want to do for both lights is enable shadows, or at least one of them. You want to enable soft shadows and make sure it's baked. Here are a couple light settings. The left ones are probably ones you have. The right ones are probably, you know, custom light settings. So anyway, back to importing packages. So we want to import environment and particle systems. This will give you a few new prefabs that you can add to your map later on, right? If we want to work with, you know, adding terrain and stuff. And here's how to add custom player skins. So let's do that also. The way to do that is you create an empty. I'm gonna name it skins. I'm gonna add a component. I'm gonna add skin, the custom skin. So we're going to create a folder. We're gonna put our textures into there. You can find the custom files on Discord. So let me show you that. Here's what they look like. So I go into Map Maker and download these images here. These are the UV layouts for those textures, so you can edit these in the image editor that I mentioned that you can download earlier to make your own custom props and skins. So I've downloaded that. I'm including it in the folder. So I should save the image. And I'll click and drag that image into there, or I'll save it in that folder. So it should appear in the folder now. And now I'm going to look for the guards. This is the image I'm going to save here. So I save it. And it should open up the window. Save image. Okay. And I'm going to save it in the custom maps, custom map skins folder. And now we have both the skins. But before it works, we need to make a material for each. So I'm going to name this Intruder skins, and I'm going to create another material, and I'm going to name this guard skins, or guard material. And we want to click and drag the albedo into each one. Make sure they're the right skin for the right material, right? The guard one on the guard, the guard image on the guard, and the intruder image on the intruder material for the skins. And then you want to go to skins. You want to click and drag the materials that you just made into those, into the respective slots. But we should organize the rest of our hierarchy, right? So I'm going to take all these game objects and put them in empties that I've labeled. You want to do this for the whole of your hierarchy. That way it's organized and you know where everything is, and you can tweak things more easily, right? I'm going to create an empty here. It ended up in my spawn, so I'm going to drag it out. And I want to label this objectives. And I'm going to take all the objectives and put them in there. Again, these are just ways of organizing your hierarchy so it's easier to edit your map. and add and remove stuff to it. So those are my doors. And here I'm adding more stuff to sort of organize. I'm going to take my audio sources and my particles, and I'm putting them in there. I'm going to create another empty game object and put my lighting in there. My spotlight, directional light, and point light are all in the lighting, empty now. And I want to put that in there. The terrain is probably one of the only things that are left out. I'm going to create an empty for glass. I'm going to put all the glass objects in there. So here's another folder, and again the glass. So I'm going to make a folder for glass right now. Glass, and I'm going to take the glass proxy and put it in there. And the only thing that should be left outside of our hierarchy is probably the terrain. Again, it's not too big of a deal. But yeah, that's how you organize your hierarchy. Now, let's test it. Everything should work as intended. So now if I use the cam stick and point it at myself, I should have the textures on. Good. And the hierarchy is organized too. Terrain. So we're clicking terrain here in the game object list in the toolbar. We're going to vertex snap it to the corner of our floor. I'm going to resize it to, you can resize this to whatever dimensions you want, but you can only have one terrain in your level, unfortunately. That's the limitation. You can only have one of these. So make sure it's the right size. You can mess around with the brush settings and the opacity, and also you want to fix the resolution, so you want to set it to default medium. Yeah, so if you have default medium, it should be fixed if it gives you an error under the light map parameters. So now you want to tweak the settings and get a nice brush. Then you can add hills by left clicking. There's also smoothness and other settings here. I'm going to smooth these hills out by clicking that icon. And we can smooth them out. And we can also add custom textures, and the way you add those are by clicking the brush. And you can also add custom grass. You can add grass textures and have different types of shrubs or foliage on the surface of your terrain. But for now, make sure that you had the environmental package imported, because otherwise it's not going to work. And again, I told you to import this earlier, but if you haven't, make sure it is. It takes a bit to import the textures, but once it's done, you can click the brush, you can click edit textures, add textures, and you can select one to go in the first slot, not the second one. You don't want it to go in the normal, you want it to go into the smoothness. So again, you want it to go in smoothness. So here's grass again, and
we can add. And once we add it, it's going to be added to the whole terrain. And we can add another texture. We can also edit the tiling here. So I'm going to edit the tiling so it looks nice. And that looks almost good enough. Maybe this number. It's too small. Let's see. That looks good enough. So now I'm going to go to add textures. Now we add a different grass texture. I think the only other one is this one that's included in the package. Of course, you can download textures from textures.com that are grass and have those in your level instead of these prepackaged ones. But once we select the texture we want, we can edit the brush and we can paint over the previous texture and give it differences, right? It sort of blends them together. And again, we can edit the tiling. You can have a different tiling here. We can make it a large tiling pattern or a smaller one. I chose a medium one. And again, paint so it looks nice. And it doesn't look that bad. But now, how do you clip this off? So let me show you how to clip it off. If you don't want people to wander in certain areas of your map, you want to create a CSG. And again, it's going to go inside your clipping wherever you have that stored, right? So I'm going to make another empty, and it's going to be clipping, player clipping. And I'm going to put that in my Saber CSG folder, where I have all the Saber CSGs. I'm going to create a CSG brush, and I'm going to select it and drag it over. I'm going to set it to invisible after I set it up. And I'm going to resize it to be about this big. That should prevent players from jumping on top of it. And I can scale it and add another one. And this should stop people from jumping over the hill if I wanted them to not jump over the hill. I set it to invisible, then I click rebuild, and it should be clipping people or stopping people from going up along the hillside now. That's how you set out of bounds areas. Now we can test it. So it's building the player now. It's gonna take a bit. It depends on how much you have in your level, whether, you know, compiling takes a long time or compressing takes a long time. So the more you have, the longer it'll take. It's normal. So now that it's built, I can join intruders. And now if I try to walk towards this area, I'm stopped by the invisible wall. I can't go over there anymore. Of course, I can still, you know, jump over there and stuff, or throw stuff. You want to make sure that your clipping has ignore bullets tag, like your stairs did. That way projectiles and stuff can still fly out of bounds. So here's how you make custom keypad doors. You want to spawn a note proxy, and you can spawn it under the generic note menu. You can spawn a keypad under the spawn prefab generic keypad menu. You want to place your note proxy into the keypad passcode note at the top. then what you want to do is select either the left or the right half of the door. You want to select that door and then tweak the settings. So either the left half or the right half should go under unlock custom door. Then what you want to do in that door is you want to disable can lock pick, and you want to set to always locked. And make sure the other one is set to always locked also, and make sure that one is also disabled for the can lock pick option. This note usually reads 1, but you want to set it to 0. Make sure it says 0 in the notepad proxy for it to generate a code. And then we can test the level. And it should work in game. Okay, so here's how to add fire to your level. Remember where I told you to import the environment package? You want to go to assets, you want to go to standard assets, and this is after you've imported the environment package and the particle systems package. You want to go to particles, you want to go to prefabs, and here we have a bunch of prefabs. We have a fire complex particle, and this is to simulate fire. It's got like 3 particle systems, one for smoke, one for sparks, one for fire. And you can drag and drop this around. It even has a light source in it. And that's how you make fire. You can also add an audio source and add a crackling fire sound effect. I mentioned how to add sound effects earlier. So you can pretty much give it a crackle sound effect for fire, and it's done. So as you can see, the fire can't really kill us right now, so we want to add a death zone to the fire. So we want to create a CSG. We want to position it like near or on the fire particle system and light source, just so it sort of covers everything around it. And then you want to go to the mode in the brush settings in the bottom left. And you want to change that to a volume. You want to change that to a death zone volume. There you go. And now we click rebuild. And since we're organizing our hierarchy, I put that in the death and slip zones empty full thing to kind of organize my hierarchy a bit better to aid my navigation. So I click rebuild. And once I test the level, as soon as I touch the fire, I'm going to pretty much drop dead. So let's load it up. And now when I touch the fire, I'm instantly dead. Okay. Now this is how to add ladders. I've taught you how to import 3D models already, so I'm just gonna look up ladder here. And once I find a ladder, I am going to import it. This is a nice collection right here. So I'll click this. I'll import the FBX file type. And once I have that imported, so I drop that into my desktop, and then I drop that into my ladder folder that I recently made in the models folder. Now I click and drag the prefab into the scene, and here I delete the ones that I don't want. So I'll delete, so I'll have to select them by group in the hierarchy. I want that one, so I'll delete the other ones surrounding. And now that I have this one selected, I want to angle it so it is leaning against the wall. I probably want to scale it up also. I'm going to lean it up against the wall. Make sure that it's only affecting the x-axis. And there it is. Probably want to move it closer. That way it's not too far away from the wall, because I might get strange collision or hitboxes there. This is personal preference, but what I like to do is disable colliders, but you definitely want to generate light map UVs on the ladder. The reason I disable colliders is sometimes the models might have a funny hitbox and you don't want people to get stuck on it. So I have it disabled so when people climb up the ladder, it doesn't collide with them. It doesn't collide with the player. So in order to add the ladder volume, I'm going to create an empty and I'm going to name it ladders. And I'm going to put the ladder inside that. And once I have that organized the way I want it to, I'm going to organize it by simplifying my hierarchy a little bit more here. And I'm going to create a CSG. And I'm going to put that inside that folder. Now I'm going to move this Saber CSG brush to sort of add a ladder hitbox to this prop. I'm going to drag it up. And I'm going to drag it up further and set it inward. So it's closely following the prop. I'm going to set it to volume. I'm going to set it to a ladder volume. And the same thing for the bottom one. I need to set that to a volume. And set that to a ladder volume also. And once I've done that, I will click rebuild. What I'm tweaking here is adding a slip zone. So if you add a slip zone volume, people can't walk on the ledge there. It makes people slip off, or if you make it super slippery. So I've added a super slippery ledge and a ladder volume. Now, if I join the Intruder team, it should let me climb up the ladder, and if I try to go to the left ledge, I should slip off. So the ladder works fine. Intruder has a lot of scripts to tweak gameplay. For example, there's the equipment manager that lets you tweak the spawn loadouts for either the guard side or the intruder side. And so I'll add an equipment manager here. And the way to add it is you add the script by clicking add component or going to the scripts folder and clicking and dragging it onto the empty. There's a gravity proxy to tweak gravity settings and how sort of gravity works in game. There's ignore sticky, there's a keypad proxy. Ignore sticky pretty much disables allowing you to put sticky grenades or motion sensors on an object. You can also look at locked objects, map mode settings. So if I enable map mode settings, I can add a round timer and a round time length. So I'm gonna put 130 for this map. Again, it's measured in seconds. So 120 is like 2 minutes or so. The objective tab settings basically enables you to put images of your map onto the objective tab. So when you press O in a map, it lets you see where the package is and many other things. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put one image in there, and I'll show how it works, sort of. Another thing you can mess around with is the gizmos. So like I'm gonna disable these to take a sort of screenshot. So let me take a screenshot here, and I'll add that into the objective screen here. So I need to save this. Okay, I'll save it here. A building photo. I'll add that into the objective image. So I'll need to add that into my library here, my asset folder. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to create a folder. I'm blanking. Oh, there it is. Okay. Create a folder. I'm going to put the objects in that folder, or the images in that folder. Objectives tab. I'm going to drag and drop it in there. I'm going to drag and drop that into there. And now when you press O, you'll get a picture of the building. And now I can test the map. The gravity is lower. It's not too noticeable, but now when I press O and click the objectives tab, you can see the picture of the building. And so if I lower gravity even further, it'll be more noticeable. Now, other things you can probably mess around with, you could just take another look into the scripts folder, and you can pretty much mess around. Some of them might not work because they are base scripts, and base scripts are pretty much ones you cannot modify or cannot tweak. And that would be like that would be ones like I can't think of one off the top of my head, but there's a few that you can't really mess with. Also, the scrolling UVs script makes it so that UVs sort of move in a given axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this cube a grid material. I'm going to click and drag it over the cube, and it matches up perfectly. Look at that. And now I want it to scroll. And right now it's set, I believe, to the x-axis. So now when I start it, the UVs will scroll towards the x-axis. So look at that, they're going outward. And the tuning, basically, for the tuning, you want to go to a website that allows for easier things, because otherwise you're going to have to script it by hand. So I'm going to Intruder Game Tuning, or Tuner, and then you go to the room tuning, you click the link, And you can mess with any of the settings here. For example, jumping, movement, sliding, or player movement, you know, life, how much HP a character has, the weapon parameters. You can change the team names. You can attack teammates and so on. So I've tweaked a bunch of settings here. Skipped ahead. I've pasted it, and if you go to a test, it says valid JSON. It won't work if it says invalid. But once it's valid, the tuning should work. You can also mess with gravity volumes. So essentially, there's a bunch of other settings in the volume option and brush settings. So volume, you can disable or enable gravity. There's a whole bunch of settings you can mess around with the volume option. So I'm gonna mess around with the gravity or physics gravity. And what this one does is you can tweak it so that it disables player gravity, or it re-enables it, and you can sort of tweak a bunch of settings here. If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to hop into the Discord and ask away, or you can test it on a sort of test world and figure it out. You pretty much learn by experimentation and by map making a bit. You might not know what something does, and then you do it on a test world, and then you figure out how to mess around with it and play with it a bit. But yeah, the physics volume I made there disables gravity. So if I walk into it, it'll disable gravity indefinitely until I reach a zone that re-enables it again. So if I ragdoll, it'll send me to the moon. So now when you upgrade, you might have to delete the custom package. So you delete the custom package and you'll get like a pink background. But re-importing the new package should fix it, right? This usually happens when you're upgrading and you delete the Intruder mapmaker. You'll delete the textures and you'll end up with this sort of mess here. It's sort of cyan, or not, it's magenta, and no textures. But once you re-import the new package and restart Unity, it will correct itself. So see how some of those textures aren't working and it's sort of buggy here? So what you have to do is you have to restart Unity. So yeah, a lot of these textures aren't working even though you're messing around and such. So after upgrading, don't worry, just restart Unity. You have to close it and then reopen it, and then it's fixed. So I'm going to create an empty here. Gravity wells, or I'm going to change it to like gravity volumes. I'm going to organize my gravity volumes in an empty to keep everything organized. I'm going to change the scrolling UVs settings. I'm going to make another CSG here. And let me see here. I'm going to make a water volume. So in order to add sort of water to your map, you want to create a volume, and you want it to be a water volume. And you want to click rebuild. And once you rebuild the water volume, like there's not going to be any graphic there. You have to add the graphic manually, but once you jump in, it'll function like a ladder. It'll give you the visual effect of being underwater. You need to add the graphics separately. Because as of now, that only gives you the effect. Again, if you've imported the environments Unity package, you should have a water prefab inside the environments folder. You can basically resize it and rescale it. It comes with 4 tiles, as you can see in the hierarchy. I'm gonna just use 1 tile. I'm gonna delete the others. I'm gonna break the prefab, but that's fine. Actually, no. I'll just rescale the whole thing. So I'll rescale it to fit this little area. I've added water underneath. You want to be careful how you add water, because if the way it is now, people won't be able to jump back out as easily. So you want to add a little bit above the surface to help people be able to get out. Or you want to add like a ladder volume on the surface of it to help people get out. So otherwise people might get stuck in the pool. Or you might need to make a ramp. So I'll click test map. And I'll join intruders as always. And now it's scrolling in the y-axis. And now this works here. I still can't get out. So that might not be the way you want to fix that. Yeah, so as you can see, I'm still stuck here, even if you add a ladder volume to the surface. So I might have to add a ramp here. So I'm gonna fix this. I'm going to duplicate this and sort of tweak it. I'm going to take the vertices of this and click and drag them out towards the edge of the one I just moved out. I'm going to pull the water volume out and also tweak the walls. Gonna add walls on both sides. Going to rescale it. It doesn't matter too much as long as you can't see you can't see into the outside. You don't have any seams. I'm gonna extend this water volume out. I'm gonna pull the vertex, the 2 vertices out towards the edge of the water, and now we have sort of like a ramp. I need to fix the graphic, so I'm gonna extend that out. I'm gonna click and drag it until we get it covering the entire surface of the water volume. And this looks good. Now let's test again. I think we're ready to test again. So I'm gonna join intruders. And now we should be able to walk out of this pool. Because we can't climb out unless we have a ladder volume that we can climb up onto. So I can walk up the ramp in the pool. I think the ramp in the pool is the only way to get out. So I can get out and jump out. The stairs work also. There's a lot of things we've gone over. Of course, there are more things to mess around with. So I can add ignore sticky, and I can add ignore player collisions, and ignore basically any ignore tags basically disables a certain interaction, and it's sort of self-explanatory with ignore sticky and ignore player collisions. Now if we could test it, it'll take a while to load here. So, okay. So I have ignore sticky on this. Wait, let me see here real quick. So I have the round timer on. And that's the objective tab. I need to put that in the, yeah, I need to organize the hierarchy real quick. And that's just a test cube. That's fine. For the equipment manager, you can click on the loadouts. You can make test equipment. So you can click and load those in. And it's building the player once again. So I can join intruders. And now this will ignore sticky. Since there's low gravity again, it's really funny the way these sort of sticky grenades and stuff fly around. If I go try to stick the sticky grenade onto it, it sort of flies away. And smoke grenades go on for miles, and CS grenades go on for miles. And if I throw it, yep. And since gravity is low, I can also float around too. But my normal gravity isn't affected unless I mess with it. With the tuning. And here's the advanced materials script. Here's how to mess around with that. The advanced materials script pretty much allows you to add wall bangable materials and other visual effects to things you shoot. You can add it spawn sparks and chunk into pieces. And if you disable destroy bullet on impact, it will allow the bullet to travel through depending on the transfer force settings. You can also add that to physics objects, and I'll show you how to add physics objects at the end. So I'll join intruders. Now if I click and shoot, it's spawning sparks and chunking. So this is what it does when you enable spawn sparks and chunk. So here's how to spawn a physics object. So you want to add a rigid bodies component and an advanced materials script and a reset proxy onto an object. Now, as soon as you test it out, it should automatically reset at the start of a round. It should also be able to be shot or exploded, and it would move around in like a physics way. So like if I were to throw explosive charge over there and detonate it, it'll get launched, and it's affected by gravity also. So the gravity settings we have are low. So that's why it sort of falls slow and has a sort of floatiness to it. And if I reset the round, it'll also reset. And that's how you add a physics object. So make sure it has those 3 scripts. And that's it for now. Take care. I hope this tutorial helped you. I know there's a lot to learn and go over, but hopefully me splitting this video up into chapters can help you learn things a bit quicker whenever you need it. Take care.